Welcome everyone to the NWO show, your source for all things New World. We are of course live on YouTube for the second time. I know, shocker. Normally we used to stream on Twitch. That said, we're trying the YouTube thing now. We still stream on Twitch occasionally with our live streams for various different things. But yeah. So, anyways, we're here now. So if you get a chance, hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you guys for future episodes. And let's dive right in. So, I think Cloud, you got the first topic here. So
yeah. Did the New World community have something to say about that initial leaderboard feature announcement this week? Right. And it wasn't exactly all pretty. So several scathing content creators came out with videos. There was like a sea of concern on Reddit, as well as the official forums, like all surrounding this like epicenter of apparent lack of, taking player feedback into account. Although this story does have a big gotcha moment, the big gotcha twist, which we'll get to in a moment. But first, let's dive into the reaction of the announcement, and the announcement itself, right? So, I just grab the link and chuck it into chat. We had an initial leaderboard announcement. Right, this came kind of last week-ish, February 2nd. Essentially, it was the first kind of official news as to the leaderboards and when they were going to be coming in, right? That they were going to be launching on February 7th. February 7th being, obviously, Tuesday, so 2 days ago, as it were. Well, for me, 2 days ago, for you in wherever you are in the world, it may have been a day ago kind of thing. Basically, it was released on February 7th with the 1.8.2 patch. This new feature will recognize the basic. So the broad strokes of it is it's basically designed to recognize players, companies, and factions across like more than 50 categories with regards to PvP, PvE, or like, essentially sort of, various different skills like fishing skills, logging, crafting, all that kind of jazz. The sort of, the durations, as it were, can go from weekly to quarterly to month, I think weekly, quarterly, and I think bi-weekly, 2 weeks or something of that form. Somewhere around like that. But these categories are basically, you have a top 10, you have essentially, the leaderboard. So you have, I think it's like 1 to 20 or 1 to something like that. But a few of these categories actually will reward people with exclusive skins and titles. There was some feedback, a fair amount of feedback from the sort of the feature on the PTR, and a lot of people reacted to this particular announcement in a kind of a manner of kind of concern and confusion as to whether AGS even listened to the feedback that they were getting. What's your take on it, Dave?
So my take on the leaderboards is that for the initial part here, the initial part is that the rewards were not really part of the testing.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, there are certain vanity scores that are tracked, that don't actually give rewards of any kind. You just get to be called number one. But they don't actually give you anything when the reward cycle ends. Which, like, I think that understanding that is kind of half the battle. There are obviously some some statistics that are better to track than others. For instance, like OPR score is not a great stat because you can pad the crap out of it by just doing DPS to things without really achieving the objectives. So the one that's rewarded is tracking OPR based on wins. And that one, there's actual meaningful rewards, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously the one that is, objective based, better for the game to track and etc. is the direction they went. Community asked for that as well, but like both of those things are being tracked on the test server, but people really didn't look that well at the reward system and that on the test server, in my opinion. So like, I think there was a lot of hatred towards this. There was also a lot of like, there's a lot of like people expecting more to happen with the leaderboards patch and leaderboards PTR. That there's going to be other PTRs coming up really soon. That are going to be going to include other changes. For instance, they mentioned this on the forums the other day that there's going to be some relatively major overhauls to combat.
Yeah.
And so like people were expecting that in the PTR with leaderboards, but that was never actually announced to be in the same location. So a lot of the hatred towards leaderboards was misplaced because they were looking for something else and got leaderboards, which was the thing that AGS announced that was going to be in there, was leaderboards, not any of these other changes. So they were upset when nothing else was in there, even though nothing else was really designed to be in there yet.
There were definitely some people who were confused and a little bit concerned about that, for sure. There was also a degree of people, there was also a fair amount of people who were concerned about like the categories of things that are going to be tracked and things that will have a leaderboard associated with it. Like, even though like they were, I mean, I wasn't entirely certain whether people were like reacting to, or postulating as to whether they were going to be rewards with this or not. But like, people were concerned about, say, for example, OPR kills, right? Like, and the concern was essentially that this would exacerbate people wanting to play just to get kills, and so the concern is essentially, will this increase the sort of like the prevalence of people running muskets and just going for kills and not going for the actual win? It is a legitimate concern. The question as to whether people will do it just for the sheer fact of having their name on the leaderboard, in the top 10 or maybe in the top 5 or top 3. We don't know. It depends entirely on whether, it kind of, a lot of people thought that like, will it depend on if OPR kills gets a kind of reward at the end of it, or, whether people will still go after that even if it doesn't have any rewards at the end of the period, whether it's weekly or quarterly or whatever.
Just to take the credit for like, oh, I'm number one, which like, great, you're number one, but like that's all you get is the being able to say, oh, hey, you're number one on this thing that doesn't actually give anybody anything as a reward other than saying you're number one. Versus like some of these other categories give skins, give different awards and stuff like that. So it's like, it's understanding like what's of actual value and what's not, and like people aren't going to take those categories seriously.
Well, I mean, so that's really the debate that's going on, actually. The debate that was going on as such, which was, because I mean, obviously the leaderboards have been out for a day so far, so we can kind of gauge the reaction in a little bit when we kind of get to it. But like, the conversation and the debate was really around, do you think that people will not take it seriously, or do you think people will take it seriously, or do you think people will use it as a way to troll or basically sort of showcase how good of a killer they are? Like, because I can imagine that to some degree leaderboards can be used by companies seeking to recruit as a means of figuring out who to recruit, but But even
like,
so,
like, let's say like OPR top score, you know, like anybody who's sitting there going, "Oh, congratulations, you got a 14,000 score in OPR," is gonna sit there and go, "But did you win?" Like, because you're like, functionally speaking, like, you can get a lot of points in OPR, but not win at all. Like, not do anything of value for your team, not do anything of value, you know. And like, as somebody who like, so like, I used to run a corporation in EVE Online. You know, the most valuable people to the company were people that participated for the good of the company. Because, you know, like, in it, like, it sounds really bad when I say it that way, because like there's this mindset of like, well, they're doing work for free, but it's like, yeah, no, but like the company's success is their success, because the more the company can do, it can provide more content and more opportunities for the individuals. And you know,
it's funny the way that you put that. I'm just a quick interjection. Like, it's funny the way that you put that, because that, like, that's definitely something that we can use in a later topic a little bit further down the line. But yeah, I'll snap butt in.
So, you know, like, it's that kind of thinking where it's like, great, you're able to score really high in OPR, but like, are you shit at working with the team? Like, you know, were you capping points? Were you actually trying to win the match? Were you working well with others? Those are the things that matter to me. And I think anybody who is taking the PvP scene seriously in New World are going to look at a lot of these categories and go, like, a super high score in OPR really only says one thing. It just says that they were farming DPS, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they're not there to help, they're not there to cap points, they're not there to do anything else, because the best way to do it is to just farm DPS. You know,
I mean,
probably stands with a musket off in the distance, doesn't help anybody, you know, the whole works.
You could probably, or potentially as a recruitment tool, like, use a few of these stats like in conjunction with each other to be able to sort of figure out whether somebody's a really strong like a really strong contender for, you know, being a recruit into your, you know, into your company as such. I think, but, you know, taking a single stat other than, you know, maybe potentially wins might be a little bit suspect to basically being trolled or basically having the wool pulled over your eyes with regards to, you know, somebody utilizing whatever to make them look good when they're not exactly a team player or not exactly that great, right? At the end of the day, or like not exactly a team player, which is, you know, you need team players in you know, in a company, you know, when it comes to 50-on-50 wars, and, you know, somebody who's going to pull their weight and communicate and coordinate with people to sort of, you know, prevent you know, influence being pushed in regions or in territories that you own, right? It's an important thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a number of good content creators that have distributed their thoughts as well on the topic. I want to highlight Red Laugh and Duke Sloth. Both of them are you know, came out with some pretty good points. You know, functionally speaking, you know, where it stands for me though, I just don't think that, you know, the categories that are getting rewards are being rewarded for a reason, and the categories that aren't. You know, and like, yes, they're being tracked, but like, everything's being tracked. You know, like, total distance run is being tracked. Total, you know, like, all of these things are being tracked, whether they're on a leaderboard or not is kind of irrelevant. You know, and I do think that there should be, like, I think there should be like a vanity comical one that they just like put in for, you know, a season at a time. So like, total amount of dodges,
I think they mentioned how many times you got hit, how many times you got gored by a goat or something of that form.
Yeah,
Right?
you know,
Like
yeah,
they
how
said
many
something
times you
along
get hit by a
those.
goat or headbutt by a goat,
Yeah.
or just have fun with it. Like every time you put out a major update, like every couple of months, or every like seasonal update, you know, just throw those out there. It can't hurt. Like, and make it something funny. I mean, even if it can be farmed, it's just funny.
Yeah.
Like just to be able to say, like, I had the most amount of dodge rolls in New World in Q3 of 2023. Like,
so yeah,
sounds stupid, but yeah.
And one of the funny kind of things about like some of the feedback from this was sort of a little bit counterproductive, counterintuitive, and some of the feedback actually clashed violently with some of the feedback, which was kind of interesting. But there were definitely a lot of people who were concerned about the fact that this, that leaderboards were basically being buried, right, in the UI. It wasn't very front and center. It wasn't very sort of open and very noticeable. It was buried into the modes. Like you have to kind of go into the mode section, then there's a section of there that's leaderboards, and then you can kind of look into the leaderboards and see where it's at, right? So there were definitely a lot of people who were like, why are you burying this in a menu area? Why doesn't it have its own menu area, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting because a lot of people were actually, a lot of people were also kind of saying like, well, leaderboards are going to basically create this, this culture and this sort of drive for toxicity, right? It's going to basically like, it's going to spur people to be more toxic because they're going to be more competitive and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, which one is it? Is it going to be buried and not people not really see or notice it, or is it going to be, going to be heavily driving toxicity and like, vitriolic competitiveness, right? It's like, which one is it, mate?
Yeah.
Kind of strange.
So, in dramatic comparison, the latest Forged in Aeternum video from Amazon Games could not have hit more differently than the previous leaderboard feature announcement that absolutely bombed. The clarity of messaging, expectations, as well as updating us on all of the feedback that was previously, what we had all thought had been ignored, but had actually been taken and acted upon, as we've been discussing here. And get this, it was actually recorded before the initial announcement happened. We know this because Michael, who's actually a member, who's the community video man, I'm gonna slaughter his title, and I feel bad of it. Head of community video. He's the head of community video for Amazon Games. I'm 90% sure that's it. I'm sure I'm gonna get a message about this.
I'm sure.
Either way, he's phenomenal at his job. He's done a really good job at bringing Forged in Aeternum out and like basically showing that the studio is not unwilling to tackle difficult or even like what a lot of people would consider really abrasive questions. So he came out ahead of time and said, hey, because they were talking about certain things on Reddit, and it came out that, oh yeah, it had actually already been recorded prior to things even coming out, which was kind of cool to see, because like, one, it was like, hey, they're listening. Like, it might not look like it, but they are listening. They do hear people, when there's these large calls for things. And I can point to 1,000 different things that the community has asked for and they've gotten. All the towns look the same. They don't anymore.
No, they don't.
We want cutscenes. You got cutscenes. The new player experience is trash. We're running all over the place. Fully revamped experience.
All sorts of things, right?
Like we need more territories to capture. Boom, Brimstone Sands. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like there's just, there needs to be more end game content. Boom, mutations. Before that,
Yeah.
it was one of those. Well, okay, they added dungeons last minute as a thing. This was literally like just before launch, because player feedback warranted building them.
Yeah. They were like, this game really, really, really needs raid content. Like, honest to God. And
so they built
and
5-man raids, and then people were like, well, there's these 5-man raids, but like, we want something bigger. We want like a 20-man raid. Well, guess what? We're getting the sandworm. Like,
we're getting all sorts of things.
So it's like they're listening, but it takes time.
Yeah.
Like, and like McLeod and I actually had a discussion about like the PvP side, or not PvP, like combat side of things, and like balancing. Because like both of us played EVE Online. The community would like more balance passes. I don't disagree. I think that we should have relatively frequent balance passes, because like McLeod and I played EVE Online, and we went 2 years without a balance pass.
Yeah.
On anything. And that was not a one-off example. Like, that's very regular. Like,
yeah, that scenario like occurred quite somewhat frequently. I mean,
that's like the last 10 years. Every 2 years you get a major update on combat.
Yeah, as frequently as a 1.5 to 2 year kind of wait on actual balance can occur. But like, even so, like, waiting for something to be iterated on for what feels like an age, like, was a very apparent thing in like an IP like EVE Online, for example.
Now, if you look at New World, sure, it's been what, 2 months since the last like combat, like major rebalances to weapons. But we got an announcement that there's gonna be one at the end of the month now. So it's like,
yeah, like, and there's conversation around that as well, which I think we're going to be addressing a little later on in the show. But like, there's definitely people who were hoping that the combat balancing was going to happen a lot closer to to this patch than it seems as though it's actually going to happen. So but yeah, it's that. But getting back to the actual like leaderboards video, the Forge Aeternum leaderboards video as such, like, it was very interesting how because it actually even said on the video, like, it was recorded on the 31st, right? So the leaderboard post came out on the 2nd. The video was recorded on the 31st, and the reaction to the video after people were kind of like reeling from the initial like announcement, right, was so strange, because like, it was basically everybody was going, oh my god, they actually listened. They actually listened to us. They are actually implementing all sorts of different things. Which the post, the initial leaderboard announcement post, like, didn't have in it for whatever reason. I just find that really strange, how a post after a video that answered everybody's question and allayed people's fears, almost set up people's fears. It was really strange. It's a very odd juxtaposition to be in. But like, thank God for that video is all I have to say.
Yeah. Like, the community video team, like the community management team, in all honesty, has been really doing well.
Yeah.
Like, they really have been doing a great job. I really like the team. The addition of Fen to the team has also been just great.
That is great, yeah.
Like, I don't have anything bad. Like, there's nothing bad I could say about them. Like, I think they do a good job. I don't think people have noticed this as much, but Nwin has also started posting on Reddit, and like, the devs are starting to come over to Reddit as well, because their goal is that they want to engage with the community. They want to see people's opinions. They want to understand what's going on. They want information. The more information, the better. And I think that they're doing a great job of getting that information from the community, going to all of the places that it is being, being collected.
And I think it's good because I think they're also like the team in general is kind of like picking up on like Scott Lane's kind of attitude towards feedback, which is, I mean, the thing is like when you go to Reddit, like it can be very easy to look at the feedback from Reddit and just be like, oh, they're all doomsayers, they're all like, but we have no idea whether they're actually playing the game or whether they're all just sitting by the sidelines, not playing and just offering up like their, nothing that they've actually gleaned from in game, but just hearsay that they hear, etc., and all that kind of jazz, right? But a lot of what Scott Lane has kind of said when it comes to feedback and how he approaches feedback is, a lot of the time it's the bad feedback, it's the critical and harsh feedback that you need to listen to the most.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like the good,
seems
the
like
good
it's
stuff
kind
is
of
great to be able to be like, hey,
starting
let's
to
give
permeate.
props to the right people, but at the same time, it doesn't really help you develop.
Board. But it's like,
it doesn't help you develop or fix anything. Like the good stuff is like great, we can do more of that, but like we're losing people because certain things are broken, and so like where you're gonna get that is from the people that are on the forums going, this is broken, this is terrible,
and it'll take more work. It takes more work to get down to the actual true pain point, because a lot of the time people can like react and people can complain about not a pain point but the symptom of a pain point, and it's kind of like it takes a certain level of persistence and a certain level of grit and resolve to not take what's been said, somebody can be very direct, right? Somebody can be very direct and almost be kind of a little bit condescending, a little bit vitriolic in what they say, but it takes it takes grit and resolve to kind of look through that and ask the right questions to figure out quite what is aggravating them and see the actual problem and then being able to address it, right? That takes a little bit more time, a little bit more effort, and is something that it doesn't happen often enough on Reddit, mainly because it always tends to sort of spiral down into massive inflammatory arguments and all that kind of stuff. But I think for the game and for the community and for the devs as a whole, it's an important thing to do. And to some degree, it's an important thing for the devs to sort of be a part of, at least, slightly, at least, temporarily, and kind of see what's going on. So it's good. It's good that they're there.
Like I think it's like I think they're in a good spot. They're doing the right things. Everything appears to be going in the right way on that. So let's dive into our next topic here. These latest patch notes for version 1.8.2 of Amazon Games New World started off so promisingly and then fell off a cliff. And so it seems down to how it was communicated. There were also inadequate explanations as to why certain changes seemingly had to be made. Don't get me wrong, there were positive changes, and obviously the leaderboards were included in this patch, but the good didn't alleviate the bitterness of how or why Brimstone got a chest and loot nerf. And we're not talking a small one. We're basically like, if this was a nerf bat, nerf should be teaching like GM how to make rocket launchers. Like, because this was a pretty brutal hit to Brimstone Sands, and it wasn't communicated particularly well.
No.
So here's my first thought on this. Functionally speaking, what they did was remove 28 large chests and sarcophagus from parts of Brimstone Sands.
Yeah.
Realistically, this is not that big a deal. Understanding why they did it is actually quite important. For those that don't know, there are things called world tours that basically go around, do all of the elite zones, and basically run the full map. They take about 2.5 hours or so to get everything. Some people will end at Brimstone Sands because like it gets a lot more involved from there. Because you have to worry about runes and you have to worry about, you know, X, Y, and Z. Like it just gets to be a little bit of a pain in the ass sometimes. But basically the number of large chests and the number of really big just really big the amount of loot drops, frankly, in Brimstone Sands is broken as fuck. Like I don't think anybody really looking at it can say that it's not, because it's way more than it should be. You know, that you can farm golden scarabs out of sarcophagus like way more than you think you should. You know, like there is a lot of extra reward going on there. There's also a lot of glyph chests in Brimstone Sands that, like, the elite chests, they're all over the place, guys. Like I'm of the opinion that this isn't a bad change. And I know that there are going to be people out there who are adamantly against this because it ruins their run. I don't really I just don't.
The thing is,
I don't think that this is a bad thing, and especially after the communication came out of why they did it, which should have been included in the patch notes.
I mean, it should have been included in the patch notes. Yeah, there was a kind of an inclusion as to sort of why, like after the fact as to why it happened. You know, the thing is, when Brimstone came out, like, and all the various different things that came out with it, you know, Great Sword included, you know, a lot of the content felt like it was overtuned, right? Like, and to a degree, it energized a lot of people to come back, play the game, because it was like, oh, this is great, this feels great, etc., etc. But like, you know, the feeling of like this region being just an absolute treasure trove of, you know, stuff. You know, the amount of legendaries that you could get by just doing like regular quests, like what was a glaring sign, you know, of like how ludicrous the drops for the you know, in Brimstone Sands, you know, how ludicrous it was. You know, you could go and do various different things and get rewards with legendary weapons, like all sorts of legendary weapons and that kind of stuff. Like, it was like, you don't really get that in any other area of the game. Like, and it's still not really the case, and they haven't really, you know, Aegis haven't pulled back on that. I have no idea whether they have any plans to or anything like that. I'm concerned that they might, but it's one of those things where the experience, I think people got used to the fact that this is just how Brimstone is, and so they thought that, like, obviously if they haven't changed it since Brimstone launched, then clearly everything's fine, this is how it was intended to be. So I think this is one of the reasons why people were kind of like taken aback, or sort of like, you know, this came out of the blue to a lot of people, is because we've gone so long with, you know, these overtuned kind of loot drops and all that kind of stuff in Brimstone, that people thought, well, I mean, they haven't changed it for, you know, 2 months or so, surely, or 2 or 3 months or something like that. Like, surely in that regard, AGS think it's normal, thinks it's fine. But clearly that's not the case.
Or they just had so many other things.
I mean, could be, yeah.
With how much of the development is not outsourced. Sorry, you're mistaken.
Yeah, it's not.
From chat, I'm sorry, that's just not a thing. They've got 250 people in the development staff in the San Diego studio.
I have heard of that, like that sort of claim that the development is, or some kind of aspect of the development is outsourced, and I have no idea where that claim has come from, but like I have never seen any aspect of or any official kind of claim that any aspect of the development of New World is outsourced. Like the support side is a little bit outsourced, yeah. Like the support side of dealing with support tickets and that kind of thing, yeah, fair enough. But the development of New World, no.
Yeah. The things that we know to be outsourced. Feel free to show me what you're talking about, because
yeah.
Like one thing that we know is outsourced is the moderation team, but that's just because we have access to a job posting that referred to external teams dealing with moderation. Which I think they've been trying to reel that issue in, but the vast majority of the development, if not the entire development of the game, is internal. Like that's very much how it is. And I know this as somebody who's about as close to the team as it can possibly get without being on it.
Yeah. So if we jump back on track as such, like the additional kind of post as to the explaining as to why these chests and sarcophaguses, is it sarcophagus? I think it's that. I think that's the plural, right? Sarcophaguses. Either way,
sarcophagi.
Anyway, sarcophagi. I don't know. Either way, right? The reason why they were removed, there was a post by Tiger Crane, who's a New World developer, that basically went, thanks for the feedback on our latest update regarding the removal of chests from certain POIs in Brimstone. These were removed in order to bring the solo chest run gold per hour more in line with other routes and activities. Our goal is to keep the equitable balance across a variety of activities in New World, and make sure that players don't feel obliged to participate in a single slice of content or in-game activity. The aim is to rebalance more options for solo players across Aeternum. So essentially what it is they were concerned that people who are running these chest runs in Brimstone as such, that certain routes were being run solo, like very, very often, almost maybe sort of back to back kind of thing. And the concern was essentially the gold per hour that people were pulling from that were far in excess, or at least significantly in excess of other places. And so the idea is that if you're going to go and do chest runs, there's no point doing chest runs anywhere else except for in Brimstone, because that's the one that gives you the most gold per hour. And that's if there's a big if there. It's the if gold per hour was what you were trying to achieve, right? Was the main goal for what you were doing. A lot of people say that like it wasn't the gold per hour that people were going for with the chest runs. It was actually rare trophy materials that people were going for, and then taking those and basically selling them on the marketplace. So I don't know. I do kind of see where Tiger Crane is coming from, but like one of the other kind of things is, do you not want a little bit of unbalance in equity, so that like so long as that that sort of like disparity is kind of like only in different things, and so each area has like it is a little bit more of a draw for certain aspects, right?
Mhm.
That's how I would kind of see it working. But it seems as though AGS feels like they need to keep this sort of this balance in terms of gold per hour to be basically the same regardless of where you are when you're doing chess runs. I don't know, how do you feel about this, Ace? Like that particular kind of viewpoint on this problem or viewpoint on this change?
I mean, like if realistically, if this is the thing that people quit over, then it's a dumb thing to quit over. Just like it doesn't really change much, you know. Like you do these chest runs once or twice a day at most, if you time things right, you know. And the reality is, you know, you can just run the full loop and get more, more from doing like all of the normal areas as well. Like it's the idea of bringing it in line with other mechanics and other ways of earning money, other areas even, I think is a responsible step. But as with most things that are responsible steps, there's gonna be a reasonably large portion of the population who doesn't want to do it because it is like it can be the right thing to do and people still don't want to do it. It's like telling people to quit smoking. They don't want to do it. Because they like what they're doing. Well, it's unhealthy. Well, I don't care. Like.
Yeah.
Like, it's just some people aren't ever going to be able to see the logic behind it, and yeah.
I mean, I thought some of the logic may be based around, sort of looking at the economic sort of inputs and outputs of the game or of the system, and maybe that the amount of gold that's being injected into the game, from people running those chess runs, was a bit too much. But like, there was definitely some additional kind of concerns with regards to, if like AGS are concerned about the amount of gold that's coming in by people doing these like solo chess runs all the time, like, there's other areas of the game that kind of give you a significant amount of gold, more so than well, at least the concern from people was that there's areas of the game that give more of a big whack of gold for the time that you've spent doing something than just doing these chess runs. Some of the kind of things which were stated were things like mutated expeditions, the gold kind of option that you can choose on PvP, on the PvP tracks, that sort of stuff, right? So it's kind of like, what really is the concern that Tiger Crane is trying to describe to us in that post is still a little bit confusing and a little bit a little bit sort of lost. So like, we kind of need more clarification with regards to that, and I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much conversation and so much sort of argumentative like discourse with regards to this particular part of the patch notes, because people are just so confused as to quite why this is meant to happen.
Here's my problem. There's still plenty of chests out there, and realistically, if the time in between large chests goes up 20 seconds, is it really player enjoyment that's suffering? Like, how enjoyable is it to pull from chests? Like, it's enjoyable when you get something good, don't get me wrong, but like, you know, functionally speaking, like, that's not particularly engaging content. Especially like if anybody argues that like world tours are like the pinnacle of positive player interaction and that, like, you've never run one, because like you'll lose faith in humanity running one. You know, having run many of them, I can tell you, you know,
the novelty the novelty wears off you quite quickly after a while. Like, you know, after a few, you know, instances of running them, you know, it's a case of, it's a nice thing and it's a cool kind of thing to see that many people running and doing some, you know, some stuff together. But like, you know, almost at the end of by the end of it, you kind of realize that this isn't like a group activity where your particular part and function of it is very necessary and needed and you know, valued as such. It's just basically a whole bunch of people doing a solo run kind of at the same time, you know. And that's kind of the power of it, is basically the amount of damage that you can deal, and the fact that if you're not, you know, if you're at a state where you're not doing enough damage to basically go through those particular areas, it helps you kind of go through those particular areas and get the rewards that are associated with those areas. But like, it's not like it's a mutated expedition where your participation and your, like, you know, your your contribution is very much valued. Like, it's kind of like, people will pick you up, people will be nice, you know, and pick you up if you get, you know, down and that kind of thing. But like, you know, if you're not with the group and if you fall behind, then like, you know, people aren't going to basically suddenly like stop and wait for just you, you know.
Absolutely. You know, I'm of the mentality that this really isn't a bad change.
Yeah,
like,
I think we've not, kind of,
you know,
I think we 28 chests removed from Brimstone Sands side of the patch notes at this particular point in time, right?
Yeah.
You say that we've, like, you know, beaten that particular horse to death in that regard.
Oh yeah.
So let's go with the other stuff.
Yeah.
So let's go with some of the other stuff. No. They're the other stuff at the top.
What? Top of what?
Yeah. There's patch notes. There's actual patch notes before like other random stuff.
My bad. So there's also some interesting fixes. It helps that, like, you know, I can, you know, eventually find his thing on the thing on our patch on our show notes.
I apologize. We've changed the patch notes up a bit, so you know, yeah, fair enough.
So some other major things is that there's an exploit for the hatchet and musket getting fixed. This is obviously, of course, in the game now, so there's really, you know, it has been fixed at this point, which is a good change. You know, positive overall.
Yep. There were some movement exploit fixes for like the crouch sliding that people, you know, were experiencing. You could kind of reproduce. I've seen some reproductions of that, and some of it was kind of, you know, comical in terms of speed. Then there was also some aspects that like showcased some ludicrous amounts of speed, and I'm not sure whether that was just like connection issues and stuff, but like there were some problems with crouch sliding, and there was also some issues with movement exploits with regards to prone diving as well. So they were apparently fixed. Hopefully they are, you know, not appearing in the game anymore. There were also some life staff perk fixes as well, and some kind of changes with regards to OPR and arenas. Essentially, there used to be a cooldown if you left early in OPR and arenas, and that was basically there to prevent people from, you know, exiting out and being able to go back in and essentially gain What was it specifically to deal with the cooldown initially? Do you recall that, Ace, or
Which cooldown? Sorry.
the if you left early in OPRs and arenas?
Oh yeah, it wouldn't let you back in, or wouldn't let you queue up for a while, just to prevent you from like dodging out to try and get into like if there was a second match going.
Okay.
You know, with the people that you wanted to play with or something like that.
Essentially, if you decided that, for example, you were fairly certain that the match wasn't going your way and you'd duck out early, and that would essentially doom anybody else who was staying there to be absolutely certain that they weren't going to actually, weren't actually going to win, or potentially even get enough points to be able to get the rewards at the end of it. They've re-enabled, so AGS have re-enabled that cooldown, and I think rightly so with regards to leaderboards coming in, right?
Yeah. I mean, giving people the incentive to stay in the match the entire time, to not, not stat pad, to not, do all of the shit things that we know players are gonna do. I think is important. Like trying to dip out of a match early, especially when we know that there's other stuff that's going to be happening, i.e. the cross-server OPR. That's going to become even more prevalent in when that comes out. So like, re-enabling that is a pretty critical feature. Combination for leaderboards, but also for later on too. Yeah.
I'm glad that they've. I mean, I think it's gonna grate on some people, like it always does. Like, you change something, you change something that could be universally liked, and somebody's gonna be aggravated by it, or
Oh yeah.
and gonna claim that that's the clear sign of the death of the game, etc. But like, I genuinely think that the cooldown being re-enabled is understandable, and is a good thing, especially when it comes to the leaderboard implementation and stuff. So a couple of the other kind of things that also was included was that the that company governors can no longer change the company's faction. I'm not entirely certain quite why. I think it's to just prevent people from moving over into different factions very quickly. I still imagine that you can still gut the company and then delete it and then change the faction yourself and then remake a company. Probably not with the same name, obviously, but the ability for you to move a company over to another faction easily is kind of gone. But so long as you're not like tied to a particular name, I'm fairly certain you can still go about it, but it will just it's just going to take a whole load of additional steps to do.
Yes. I personally, I think that like when it comes to the names for companies, it's similar to like how player names work right now. It shouldn't be difficult to keep the same name of the company as you've pretty much always had. By like just trying to like switch which faction you're in. Like, it's kind of like it's just a convoluted process, and it just shouldn't take as long as it does.
Yeah. I think really the only thing that is sort of tangentially kind of associated with the patch notes and stuff and with the leaderboards is the fact that since the release of the 182 update, there has been a problem with the mutated expedition leaderboards that has cropped up. It's been mentioned by Fen in the forums as a known issue, and so they are temporarily, I believe temporarily disabling the mutated expedition leaderboards until they've been able to fix it. So there is that as well.
There's like one of the cool things that they have is the ability to sorry, I got something just landed in my eye. One of the cool things that they have in New World is the ability to throw the circuit breaker. It's their phrasing that we learned from Katie when we had her on the show. Or Katie, yeah. K.
Yes.
Yeah.
K.
Just, yep. I get it wrong every time. And like, it's not intentional. It's really not. I'm gonna get so much shit for this.
I kind of feel like you can have somebody in your professional life that has a very similar name or similar-ish name, and like you keep on like.
I do.
That's the kind of that's the thing that's sort of tripping you up each time.
And the thing is, the names are spelt almost identically, so like
pronounced differently.
Yeah. And they're pronounced. Yeah, they're pronounced very differently, and it's a struggle. So. We learned that they have this ability called, throwing the circuit breaker. And what's interesting is like using a circuit breaker as an analogy means you have like a whole circuit breaker board that you have a whole bunch of switches you can throw. So like when they turn off like player to player trading, it's obviously not a thing they've done, they're doing right now, but like if they have to, they can turn off player to player trades individually. They can turn off the marketplace. They can turn off, any kind of different like specific thing. They can even go all the way down to the individual abilities when it comes to weapons. For instance, we saw them throw the circuit breaker on 2 abilities on the musket when it had its overused exploit. Which any exploit is overused because like, yeah.
That's the thing that propagates like the problem.
Yeah. It's kind of a funny situation, but it's really cool tech because they don't have to turn the server off to do it.
Yeah, they don't have to throw a patch to players like clients in order to do it either. Like they can literally
they can just turn it off and it's off right then and there. And that is just, it's great. Like it's just really good tech.
It's very powerful. Like it's a very powerful thing to have as a in your arsenal as an ability to sort of deal with a live and continually complex problem.
Absolutely. Like and it shows that like they're serious about keeping problems and solving problems early. Like as much as people will give them shit that like, oh, it took them 3 weeks to fix this thing. Like, as somebody who codes, like who has coded a lot, like, and not simple code either. Like, I don't know if people know what machine learning is, know what like, that kind of stuff does, and the code involved around it. Like, I've literally been working on data science type projects on the coding side of it as a career. So, like, I can understand that some of these things are not particularly easy to fix, and they're not something that, like, they're not something you just go in and go, oh, well, if I switch this, from a 1 to a 2, it fixes it. That's not how that works. Like, I'm gonna use Star Citizen as an example. I used this in the last show for like explaining why bugs are very difficult to tackle. There was an issue in Star Citizen for a while where if you stepped off of your Cutlass Black's ramp at the wrong angle, your first step onto the planet's surface would instantly kill you. And so the first question that would come up was, why, like, what is causing this, right? Like, this isn't, like there should be physics values in play. Like, what was happening was that you were caught in an infinite loop based on a Boolean variable in the equation, which is not a variable that you want because you want a number there. You want an integer value. You don't like Boolean means it can be something other than a number. And what was funny is it had nothing to do with the physics engine at all. The physics engine was doing what it was supposed to do, but it was entering this odd state where a certain chess piece had the wrong weight value. And the weight value was a Boolean number. It basically was a number, but it also had a character in it. So it's basically turns it into a string, which means nothing when you put it through a calculation. Because what's 5 times 5.17x? Nothing.
Yeah.
Like 17x 32, and it's not a multiplication thing either. It's just like it could be a b. It's just a random fucking digit in there. It wasn't
throws up an error
intended to be there. So when the equation for like, are you supposed to gather a damage based on a physics-based impact, ran, it wouldn't stop itself from running, and it would, because of the angle that you were stepping off the ship, you would gain 1 damage of 1 damage to your hit point pool, which really you wouldn't notice most of the time. But the problem was that it created an infinite loop. So instead of dealing 1 damage to you, it did 1 damage, boom, 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 1,000 times and instantly killed you. And then it went, problem solved. They don't have a health pool. I can't subtract anything. Problem, move along, like respawn them, So like, you like, in order to track down the bug, your first thought would be, well, clearly it's the physics engine killing them, because that's what's causing the damage, right? Well, how is it calculating the damage? Well, then it's, okay, well, is the planet's physics fucked? Is the ship's physics fucked? Is the individual's physics fucked? Then you gotta go, okay, well, what are they wearing that's, maybe causing this odd thing to happen? And then you start looking through, you got to go through all of the data sets on all of the gear and go, oh shit, there's one value here that has an R in the middle of a number.
You find the related item, right? You find a related aspect to all of the sort of like all of the reports and all of the sort of like the bug kind of like the submissions for bug reports and stuff like that. And you kind of like, you eventually whittle it down and be like, oh, hey, there's a common thread to all of these things, and it's this particular chess piece.
So it's kind of a cool, it's an interesting story about how the bug is not where you thought it would be, and why it could take you a hell of a long time to figure out where it is and what's actually causing it. Like there's so many different things that do that. Like there's the infinite gun issue in EVE Online, where if you target disrupted your own fleet enough, you actually gave them infinite stats and perfect ability to fire at unlimited range.
That was a beautiful one, because it was a case of like, they made sure that like, separately, there was no way that, anybody, utilizing anything separately, like, could ever take these values down to a negative number. But then there was an instance where, if you were in the right place with the right stuff, doing the right kind of thing, like, you could actually push this into a negative value. And nobody kind of knew what the hell would happen really as to when that happened, like what would occur if you did that. But clearly someone had found and figured it out and realized, oh, we can actually utilize this, to an insane level. And they decided to actually utilize this as an exploit. And the group that sort of, had this leveraged against, were really confused as to sort of how the weapons that they were being used from such a distance, and were hitting for such perfect kind of perfect hits with maximum damage from such a distance when they shouldn't be, right? And they eventually were able to figure it out with the information that they were able to glean from battles that they had and all that kind of jazz, and realized they essentially reverse engineered it, right? And they tried it themselves, and then they realized that when they tried it themselves and did what the enemy were doing, that it suddenly made a weapon, suddenly made a gun that basically, as you said, had infinite tracking, right? It could hit anything, however close it was, however far away it was, however fast it was flying around you, it could hit it perfectly. And even though the weapon that you were using was like a super short range weapon that had a lot of damage, but like couldn't hit out to any decent distance, the distance that it could hit out was basically infinite. So you could be anywhere and use this weapon, and it would hit for maximum damage, and it would track perfectly. And so
and the funny thing was, the fix to that had actually nothing to do with weapon disruption. It had to do with the character type that was allowed at the end of the equation for weapon damage, or for weapon tracking. So functionally speaking, you should how the equation works is it's calculating trajectory, how fast the gun has to turn to keep for tracking, distance, fall off. There's a whole bunch of things in this equation, but the problem was the value for tracking could go less than 0.
Yeah, it could go less than 0.
And because it could go less than 0, which like what they should be doing in the equation is having a check for that, or creating a variable in the setup to make sure that doesn't happen. That just didn't happen. So there are certain character types that you can use to make sure that it comes out as a 0 or positive number, and if it doesn't, then give 0. It's a simple if then, but like it does add a step to the equation, or like just use different character type. Either way you look at it, the problem wasn't the equation, it was that one of the values could be fucked. And if it gave a negative value, instead, in the way that it interacted with the equation, it instantly gave perfect tracking. So by changing what the variable could do and limiting it to 0, you now enabled yourself to fix the problem. So, like, again, it's kind of where you want to look, but not at the same time. And like, again, it took him, I think it was reported to CCP like probably a year ahead. And
it took a while.
It took him forever to figure it out. And
it took a while for them to figure it out. They even made an entire video about like how they went about like figuring it out and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's an amazing thing. But yeah, like, sometimes problems are in the most obscure kind of areas when it comes to sort of finding the fix. And hopefully some of the leaderboard fixes and stuff like that AGS have to kind of work around and work through, like, hopefully they're a little bit less obscure than some of those. But I guess we'll see, right?
I
guess we'll see.
So let's move on to some other cool stuff. Some other revelations from the leaderboards in Forge of Aeternum. Company size, like the limit on number of people in a company. Now that the mercenary mechanics are in full swing, is potentially going to be adjusted to alleviate some of the issues that have come up. So I would assume that number is probably going to go up to 200. I think.
I mean, I hope that
or
it's going to
be removed
increase.
altogether would be nice.
Being removed altogether would be great. Like I know that like me and A's like on the show, like we've said, and we've always like advocated that like that company player size needs to be increased. We've said that it like I think we've said that like a few times that it should be kind of closer to sort of what is considered to be Dunbar's number. That's it's a sort of like a sociological kind of number that is about. I think it's to do. I think it's to do with the amount of friendships, relationships that you can have with people that you can kind of determine, like where they stand in sort of like the sort of immediate relationship with like friends and all that kind of stuff, right? And I believe that number's sort of in the 150 kind of mark. There's a lot of sociological kind of studies that showcase that that's the kind of number that seems to be the one that people or sort of like groups of people seem to sort of congregate around too, right? Whether that's the right number or not, I'm not sure. It's only 50 more than what we have at the moment with a maximum of 100. And I kind of think, considering that you do have people who come and go from the game as such, that you kind of need a little bit more buffer from that. So I don't know, 2 times Dunbar's number, maybe like 300 people might be an interesting one to see. The cap basically being removed entirely might be a really interesting one, as you say, Ace. But I don't know, we'll see where AGS lands on it, I guess.
Absolutely. Right? So let's talk about the curious case of Bo.
Oh yeah, okay.
This is an odd set of circumstances that happened to an individual based on server merges. So Bo, a character BOH, was part of a server merge that was merging into another server, and his name got flagged for some reason. There's appeared to be conflict with the other server.
Yeah.
And it put his character into kind of a limbo state that he could no longer access. So he reached out on the forums to AGS and wasn't getting no response, but he wasn't getting a very quick response. And this got posted to Reddit as well. Hey, there's an issue with server merges. This guy is, in an odd position where like it's a thing. As Reddit mods, we left it up because like, hey, like that's kind of a fucked thing to happen to a person. Like, normally we take down requests from for like account
problems with individual characters on accounts, because like
account support requests, or like tech support type requests where it's like, hey, obviously like he's stuck in a technical issue, but like this could happen to anybody, so kind of a weird situation. So we left it up, and it got posted again about 12 days later, and we pulled that one down because one, it looked vaguely familiar. I didn't know at the time that it was a repost, but it was just somebody being like, hey, like I don't know if, it's day 11 of this happening and the guy still doesn't have a resolution. We pulled it down not because it was a repost, but because it was an account support request at that point, and the next day, like we had gotten into a whole debate over like the moderation policy and all of that with one of the Redditors, and it, that's a whole different ball of wax. The next day, whenever I pull something down, I don't want to give people false hope that this is always what happens, but like generally speaking, when I pull something down for a tech support request, I try and send that over to somebody at AGS. Like I've got connections over there that like, hey, I don't know if you guys saw this, it might be worth looking at. Like I don't want to take credit for being the person that helped this person, get their account back or get their character back, because like the timing is suspicious with like the dev posts, because they're basically like an hour after I sent my message, but I have no way, I don't have read receipts on the system that I use to contact them, so like,
it could have been solved before
dealing
you
with it anyways,
sent it,
and like
you don't know.
Yeah,
because
it had made it to Reddit 2 days in a row, or or it made it to Reddit the day before. Maybe they saw that, and like it was just when they got to it. And like again, not taking credit for anything here, just that's a practice that I generally do because I'm not heartless. I'm, as much as people will say, like, Commander Ray's is a true just asshole. All he's here for is just, the Reddit glory of being a moderator. I can't even say it with a straight face. It's like the world's shittiest job. It's unpaid. Like,
it's like going, oh yeah, just the prestige of basically walking into a bar and getting punched in the face. Like, prestige
all day.
Well, yeah, punched in the face, then punched in the dick, then punched in the face, then punched in the dick. Like, it's kind of like a seesaw of just horribleness that you put yourself through. Like, there's not really a great upside to it as such.
So, and like the mentality that I come at it with is that, like, my real job, I'm an emergency manager. So, helping people is kind of in my nature. I try to do what I can, at least. That said, like, if people are dicks to me, then, like, if I'm not a dick to you and you're a dick to me, like, I'm not doing you any favors. But like, if you're sitting there, like, like, Bo wasn't even the guy who posted it. Like, it was some other dude who was friends with this dude and just, like, wanted to post it to Reddit to get some support. Like, so, like, neither of these guys were particularly, a pain in the ass. They were just, one of them just didn't get the logic behind what we do and, like, why there's moderator discretion on things. But that's, again, a whole different story. But, like, I don't even know who Bo is, as, like, I've never met them before. So, send over a message. It's no big deal. That generally speaking, whenever something like that happens, or I remove like, my account got banned, I really don't think it was me. And they give logical reasons and all of that, and, like, they're not coming at it from a, like, fuck the world standpoint. Then I'm generally more willing to help. Most of the time, it comes back as, like, no, they're not. No. Nope, we looked at it, and then you find out that the person's still banned, and you're like, okay,
fair enough.
Did what I could, and like, and they know that their moderator team is not, like, they know that their moderator team occasionally needs, some looking after, and, like, it's been getting better. In all honesty, it really has. And I know that some people are like, "Oh, that's bullshit." It's still terrible. Like, yeah, but, like, look at how bad it was.
We do have a receipt. We do have a receipt for that getting a little bit better, but, like, that's coming in a little bit.
Yeah.
After the Bo story.
So it was an interesting situation. It did finally get resolved. He got his name back, or he got his character back. He did have to choose a new name, which. Unfortunate, but at least he got his character back. All his progression was still there. It was just stuck in, like, in
a weird limbo, right?
Yeah, in a weird dev limbo of, like, what the hell do we do with this account? Like,
and
super weird.
The weirdest limbo aspect of it is there was two characters called Bo.
Yes, I'm just happy the guy got his shit back.
Yeah.
This does appear like something that could happen. It is kind of a strange and unclear set of circumstances about what caused it. It's not a common thing, but just know that if a character goes missing, it's not permanent.
Yeah.
Especially after a server merge, it probably just got put into, like, this bucket of characters that, some sort of hold on that character happened.
Yeah, there's a very strange set of circumstances that causes it, or at least caused it this time. That happened fairly recently this week, in actual fact, that showcases that, that they may have a backlog of things that they are working through and that they are investigating more. There was actually somebody who finally got unbanned by Amazon's sort of Amazon Games' kind of support services. Decided to reverse the original decision. Yeah, like they basically they sent a thing saying like they finally reviewed the information that he'd provided, and with regards to their case that he'd been banned, and that they decided to reverse the original ruling decision, and so his New World account is no longer permanently banned, right? And this was something that happened like about a year ago, like the guy kind of posted here the sort of the Reddit post that he put like a year ago, saying that he got banned yesterday. He submitted 3 appeals, but they didn't seem to solve anything, and he's really confused and outraged about it because like clearly he was really confused as to why he got banned, right? And so obviously there must be from assumption, I'm working on assumption here, but like clearly there must be a backlog of things that the support staff are kind of like reinvestigating and working through, for a ban this old to be reversed out of the blue. But the fact that it's happening is an important thing, and the fact that it's starting to occur and people are starting to get unbanned is a good thing, is a positive thing.
So one of my questions about this is that the individual said he submitted 3 appeals. When was his last appeal? Like, I mean, I don't think he says.
Well, the post that he linked, or that he put into the image that he posted up, it was a post from a year ago where he said he submitted 3 appeals. Like, so the 3 appeals, the last appeal that he seemed to put at least showcasing here, was a year ago. So, when he got banned, they banned him. Apparently they banned him yesterday. He submitted 3 appeals between yesterday and when he posted this a year ago. So that's quite a significant amount of appeals put in quick succession, I would imagine.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you recently appealed again, or like,
I don't know. I'm not sure. Like,
and I'll ask him.
I mean, he said there's a.
He's not going to answer it anytime soon, but like I'll put it.
He said like, well, I actually sent them everything, dates, game logs, etc. They asked a year ago. Here you are. Yesterday, I tried to appeal a ban and they gave me an automated response. Today, for some reason, a human actually replied to my appeal and unbanned me. So it was a very recent thing that he kind of like.
Okay, so that makes sense then. I was sitting there and I was like, why the hell would they have, like, this is the equivalent of like a Jira ticket sitting on your desk for a year. So like,
finally like, getting down to the bottom of the pile and like,
somewhere that's like the average is up for some reason. Who's got an open ticket? Like, like I'm just sitting there like something had to trigger this recently, but like it's good to hear that like they're willing to review shit that they might have gotten wrong, or in this case did get wrong, or were willing to admit that they got wrong a year ago, because hey, shit happens.
Yeah.
And like arguably speaking, if the person's still adamant that they're innocent a year later, like I don't want to like equate this to the criminal justice system, because there's a lot of people who don't think they did anything, but like if they're pretty adamant that they didn't do anything wrong a year later, there's some pretty solid odds that they're probably not in.
Yeah. Aside from the old adage of go into any prison, you'll find that it's full of people who say that they were completely innocent, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Don't you know? No, everyone here is innocent. You know? It's one of my favorite lines from Shawshank Redemption.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
right next to the, like they start giving off excuses on why they're in there, and like one of the guys just like, yeah, the lawyers fucked me. Like, like,
Yeah.
if you've ever worked with lawyers, you know that that's too true of a statement. Like,
It's entirely plausible.
oh god.
Right.
So,
Well, thankfully that's a nice positive note in that regard, at least, and for people getting their access to their accounts back. So that's good. There was a little bit of talk about weapon and combat balance kind of happening. Fen actually on the official forums stated that the combat balance is on its way to the PTR, right? And people have been wondering and hoping and praying like when this will be. For clarity as such, this was the post that Fen kind of put. She basically said, "Greetings, adventurers. We'll be holding an estimated 1.5 hour downtime to update the PTR to match our live game. For awareness, we're planning to have combat balance changes on the PTR by the end of this month, pending any further adjustments." Some people saw that and reacted, harshly to that because people were expecting from a previous dev post about combat changes happening in very quick succession to the leaderboards, the leaderboard patch, and they kind of saw this and like, well, very quick succession and by the end of this month is not the same sort of thing.
I mean, in development life cycles,
yeah. What they specifically kind of were looking into was a post from Delacron, where he said
the original post from Delacron is an interesting one. The follow-up is even better. So the original post from Delacron
that was great.
The current PTR build is a more immediate patch coming to live servers within a week or so, mainly focused on quality of life bugs and leaderboards. Beyond that, we have a pretty big announcement and sizable PTR update, which will follow quick on its heels. This is what you're likely expecting, and truthfully, we're excited about it too. That was met with, well, okay, like, that's like 2 weeks is a long time to wait for this, blah blah blah.
It was wait, what? The last post on this said quick on its heels. That means 2 to 3 weeks? Question mark. Like, and Delacron.
So he responds back with, to be fair, there was a bit of a slight internal delay in order to polish up things to a high quality bar. It meant a little more waiting, which I know is pretty brutal right now. But hopefully when details are revealed and trailers released, it'll all make sense. To say more will get me assassinated by marketing. So,
that's an interesting thing.
All I'm going to say is if marketing is involved, they're making a trailer for it, and they're holding back and like actually hyping it as a big set of changes, it's probably gonna be something decent.
I mean, I'd hope that it was something decent. Yeah, like, they've got some stuff on the roadmap, right? Like, and when you kind of look at the roadmap as such, the content roadmap, spring 2023 says the Imperium Forge Expedition, gear set storage systems, the Springtide Bloom event, and MSQ improvements, right? Obviously, that it could be none of that. It could be something else, like, because they say that, like, this roadmap might change and it doesn't include all the planned content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we saw from the previous roadmap from last year that there were things on that were released that were pretty awesome, fairly big, that weren't on the roadmap, right? So it could be something that is on that spring 2023 list, or it could be something that's not at all. Like, you know, but I would imagine if they're making a trailer about it, like it's probably something pretty cool, and it probably has something with a lot of cool visuals, which, you know, I mean, that in mind, that to me puts it in mind like it might be an expedition. So like it could well be the Imperium Forge expedition, but we don't know.
Mm-hmm. It could be. It very well could be. I mean, they could have a whole bunch of shit ready. We just don't know.
Yeah.
You know, but like I think if they're hype, you know, obviously like there's gonna be some combat changes coming up. If they're looking at it from the perspective of like it's part of a bigger package, that's one thing. But like, I also think that it's you know, it's just sometimes these things need to be internally tested for longer. Sometimes they come up with a bug that like obviously they don't want to release. You know, like those kind of changes are important.
But sometimes you can release it with the bug there, so long as you have the, you know, as we talked, like the ability to turn it off at a macro level, like, you know, like switch that particular breaker off. Like, you know, from the leaderboard sort of standpoint of things, like, you know, there's still a bug with a couple of aspects of the leaderboard, you know, that they've been able to break or switch the mutated expeditions part of the leaderboards off, right? Still means that they can launch the leaderboards, you know, for the most part. It just means that they're you know, still working on squashing a particular bug to prevent a certain part of it. So, you know, fingers crossed that that degree of granularity of being able to control what things are on and what things are off, like, allows them to you know, still release certain things, even if it's, you know, 90% of that thing rather than 100%.
Oh yeah. So like I think that they're in a good spot. I'm excited to see what they're obviously hyping up here. But we'll find out more.
Yeah.
And last thing before we wrap up for the night, there is Twitch, or not Twitch loot. There is Amazon Prime loot. You know, for anybody that wants the link, throw it in the chat here.
I'm seeing if I can try and find it. I had it, and that's where I grabbed the picture of it, but like I can't find the thing of it. But like essentially, it was tweeted out on and then retracted. I'm not entirely certain why, but like it is up. I did grab it like when it was up, so I imagine it still is up. But like the new Prime gaming loot that's available for you guys, if you guys want to go to Twitch and grab it, is the Dragon Horde Prime loot, as it were. It's basically you get a turquoise silk daybed, which is like a piece of furniture, obviously. 10 Azoth vials, a runestone stopwatch, 500 umbral shards to help you with, you know, progression in that regard. If you still need progression, well, you can sell them, I guess. 10 star metal ingots if you require star metal for whatever reason, and 5 freezing lodestones for various different crafting, you know, projects that you may have. Yeah, so head over to you know, Prime Gaming or Twitch to pick that up, and yeah. And while you're doing things randomly on the internet, you know, be sure to come back to YouTube and, you know, chuck us a sub, obviously, because over here in the land of YouTube, subs are free, and it will definitely help us out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right.
Other than that,
with that, as we always love to say, we'll see you guys in the new world.